Hello, 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 New Haven, and people of the internet, whoever's out there, and welcome back to Arts Respond on WNHHLP 103.5 FM New Haven. It's gray and cloudy out there, and I've been writing about federal cuts to different programs all week, but we are going to bring some sunshine into this conversation. With me today is Cadence Pentheny, and we are talking about the Reach Fund of Connecticut. So, Cadence, I will let you take it away in just a minute, but I wanted just to introduce you. So, Cadence is a board member and secretary with the Reach Fund. They've been in that position for about 2 years. And the Reach Fund, for folks who maybe haven't heard of it, and we'll talk about this a lot more, is Connecticut's, I believe, first abortion fund. We'll talk about what an abortion fund is, and they are in the midst of something called a Fund-a-Thon, which goes through the end of May 31st. And this is sort of in concert with the National Network of Abortion Funds, which will match up to $50,000. So we'll talk about what that is. I never put disclaimers on this show, but today I'm going to just very, very briefly. Because we always give feedback when we talk about reproductive choice, access, equity, abortion. And that is, if you don't like what we're talking about, I invite you both to engage and to listen and to welcome this conversation as a potential chance for education. And also, if you don't like what we're talking about, that's fine. If you don't like abortion, don't have one. But with that, Cadence, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for making time in your busy Friday for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
So I want to jump right in. Our listenership is really, really general on this show. Some folks may be super versed in what an abortion fund is. Some folks may say, I've never heard that term before in my life. So can you talk a little bit about what an abortion fund is and sort of how the Reach Fund entered the scene?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was one of those people, I had never heard of an abortion fund before I met folks from Reach a couple years ago. So essentially, we are an organization that fundraises money. That's our primary goal in order to give it to people who need support in paying for their abortions. So essentially, we take money in and we send it right back out to people who need it for their abortion as a form of the health care that they need. We are a small, all-volunteer fund. We've only been around, I believe, since 2021. I'm always mess up the dates, but it's only been a couple of years, and we are Connecticut's first and only abortion fund as of now.
Sorry, I was muted. You would think after 5 years of this, I would have figured out how to use Zoom pretty more fluently. But I'm also wondering if you can talk about the cost that is the sort of the whole cost, because as we know from people like the Guttmacher Institute, which they do wonderful, wonderful policy work over there, we're not just talking about a medical procedure. And so there are two kinds. There's medication abortion and then surgical intervention with abortion. So if you hear about something like a DNC, that's what we're talking about. There's also everything from the cost of childcare, because often people who seek out abortions may already have one or more children. There's the cost of taking time off work, and depending how flexible or not your job is, we're really talking about risking losing a career. There's the cost of transportation. And so it balloons beyond the medical procedure itself.
Yeah, absolutely. So the average cost of just a first trimester abortion is usually between $500 to $600, right? And so that's just first trimester, which again, majority of abortions happen earlier in someone's pregnancy. But there are, of course, many reasons why someone would need an abortion later. So it only gets higher from there. It gets really, really, really high, especially when we do solidarity funding, support supporting folks who are, coming from other states outside of Connecticut. Like I've seen, emails from clinics, and it's somewhere like $30,000. It can get very, very, very high. And specifically in Connecticut, there's a lot of wealth disparity. And that's one of the ways that I think we come in as well. And there's also, in Husky, our insurance here in Connecticut, it does cover abortion, but there's also many reasons why someone wouldn't be able to use their insurance, right? A young person, they wouldn't want it to show up if it's unsafe for their parent or guardian to know that that's a healthcare procedure that they needed. Folks experiencing domestic violence, right? Not a partner, not wanting their partner to know. There's many different reasons why, even with insurance coverage that we have in Connecticut. Also, you could have private insurance that doesn't cover that, right? So there's many different reasons why people need healthcare covered. As a small new fund, we are working on growing our practical support avenues. So practical support is all of those things that you're talking about, healthcare and loss of wages. I mean, not healthcare, but childcare and loss of wages and transportation, like all of those things. We're working on growing those avenues. But as a new fund right now, just the healthcare, but the more we raise, the more we can start exploring those things. So that's always something I want folks to know too.
And you've sort of gotten to this preemptively, but my next question was going to be, I'm wondering if we can talk a little bit about the many reasons that folks would seek out abortion care or seek out a termination, including, and I only say this because I have been like shocked and appalled by the lack of very basic scientific knowledge, including for pregnancies that are wanted and end.
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, myself and everyone that we work with and our supporters and volunteers, I think it's none of our business. It
I
really,
would agree.
yeah, it really fundamentally for me, and I think so many other people who are doing abortion funding and abortion work, like it is none of my business that if someone comes to me and says they need an abortion, it's yes, right? It's a need and a want also. I think often sometimes in reproductive justice and pro-abortion spaces, we stray away from that of like, oh, well, everyone gets an abortion because they need one. No, sometimes you want one because that's what's best for your life. Both things are very, very important. If folks have heard about the Turnaway study, it's an incredible book, but it follows many people, some who were able to get an abortion and some who weren't, and all of the impacts that it had on their life, their ability to pursue education, to be financially stable, to just move and be the people that they wanted, and the deep impact it had on people who were not able to get abortions that they wanted or needed for whatever reason it is. It has a huge impact on people's life. So no matter what, it's something that somebody needs and wants. But there are, of course, so many situations in which it's a pregnancy that was deeply wanted, right? Someone wanted a baby, they wanted a child. And, something we don't talk about is a miscarriage, like the procedure, if you need one, it is an abortion, right? Even if it's a wanted child, if something happens, right, that it's the same procedure, depending on what has happened, right? So there's so many situations, and I think something that I'm really grateful for is, as a fund, is we're not asking any of those questions. If you are telling us this is something you need or want, it's just a yes.
I'm really grateful that you said that. It's interesting. I grew up in a very pro reproductive choice household, but in a pretty conservative town in Michigan, and so that tension was very real in my life. Where at home, my mom was like, "It's no one's mucking business," and then I would go to school, and people were like totally all up in your reproductive business. If you talked about that, if you talked about sex or pregnancy or abortion. But I totally agree with you. And I'm also wondering if you can talk about some myths and realities, because I think we are in a period that has been building and building and building, right? Like this didn't happen with the Dobbs decision. This has been, I think, a calculated move from the right wing for the past several decades.
Yeah.
But we're in a period of a lot of sort of like lies and
Yeah.
myths and just like disinformation. And that absolutely extends to reproductive rights.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, another reason why I think it's hard to talk about money. It's hard to talk about money, I think, a lot of the times these days when so many people are struggling, but it's really important to acknowledge that that's sometimes what's necessary, right? Even before the Dobbs decision, folks who were poor and marginalized in other ways did not have access to abortion the same way that many people did. So, kind of in the movement, we talk about this distinction between reproductive rights and reproductive justice. So reproductive rights is legal stuff. It's policy, it's law, right? It's all of those things, right? Is abortion legal, right? Which is of course important and going to make the ease of access easier if it's legal. But reproductive rights, which is a framework founded by Black women, is framed to talk about more than just the legal side of things, right? So again, thinking about wealth disparity and access and all of these things, right? Abortion was still difficult for people in Connecticut to get if they didn't have the money, if they didn't have access, if they didn't have childcare, if they were marginalized by being undocumented, by being disabled, by being, anything, right? Being a person of color, right? Just not having access to those things. So the legal landscape and the rights are just one piece of it. There are so many other things, and reproductive rights, reproductive justice, rather, as a framework, is about the right to have children, the right to not have children, and the right to raise children in safe and healthy environments. It's all of those things. And I think we just see an abortion fund, again, people's just ability to even make the choice in the first place is so often limited by their access and their finances.
Yeah, I'm wondering, I know this goes a little out of order as far as like the questions we discussed, but I'm also wondering how this fits into the greater landscape, which I feel like you were going there, because sometimes folks talk about abortion like it's over here,
Yeah.
and then birth like it's over here. And then everything out, like your annual pap, or not annual pap smear, but like mammograms and pap smear, all that good stuff, right? And I find that they're deeply, deeply intertwined.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and as someone who's given birth in the past 2 years, I feel like I have credit. I can say that.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, the data shows that I believe the majority of people who have abortions are already parents.
That's correct, yeah.
Yes. I was trying to remember if it was across that 50% mark, but it is, right? It is, yeah. Most people are, and it's, again, even more so, like it's a part of our whole reproductive like journeys and healthcare needs and capabilities. Like it's a huge chunk of the puzzle missing if we are taking abortion out of that, right? And it's just, again, people, I find, even, so something we talk about, we do like teach-ins and educational things and things like that, and we always are very clear to say, like, we are pro-abortion, and that makes people uncomfortable. Like, what do you mean? You're just pro-reproductive rights, right? I'm like, no, specifically pro-abortion, because again, that's what we do. We fund abortion care. We fund that method of healthcare specifically, and also, again, as you're saying, abortion is a piece of all of these other things that we all need when it comes to reproductive health care and access.
So I was also really fascinated to learn that since October 2022, the Reach Fund has assisted 17 patients, and that's like a total, in that 17, a total of $33,000 for abortion care outside the state. Because I think often when folks talk about abortion care in Connecticut, people say, oh, it's a blue state. We have access. The gestational cutoff in Connecticut is 24 weeks, which actually, for like multiple reasons, having been through a pregnancy, is not as late as people might realize, because you have something called an anatomy scan at like 18 to 20 weeks, and that's really when you find out if, for instance, the fetus that you're carrying has maybe a terminal condition where it will not survive outside the womb or something like that. But I'm wondering if you can talk about the fact that maybe Connecticut's landscape is a little more complicated than just, oh, we're a blue state, and that's the end of the conversation.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Again, it's something we hear all of the time of like, oh, what do you mean we need an abortion fund here? Like, again, just or why are we even worried about talking about abortion in Connecticut? It's legal, but that gestation limit has a big impact. Again, as you're saying, right? Someone might not find out until past that point in their pregnancy that something is wrong, and again, then they would need to travel for their care. The big one that we see is, and also, first of all, people, if they want to travel for their care in the first place, right? If they have a specific hospital or a place they want to go, they should also be able to do that, right? That's another part of the choice. Another thing that we see, a lot of young people, unfortunately, a lot of minors, they might have irregular periods, they might have other things going on in their lives. They might not know until later, right? And that happens with a lot of people, but often we see that happen with minors, right? They often are the ones who need to travel for their care because they didn't know they were pregnant until later on as well. And again, folks with disabilities who have conditions that means they need a specific kind of care, they often need to travel. Again, think about the added layers and the weight to that as well. But it's gestation limits, again, people don't think about that a lot, and 24 weeks is not as far along as we think, as you were saying.
I think I agree with, am I, okay, good. I'm unmuted. Sorry, Zoom was telling me that I was muted. Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard because we read, like birthing people, a lot of the literature is going to tell you 24 weeks is sort of the threshold for viability outside of the womb. And that can be true. And we are very lucky to live in a state where there is really life-saving medicine. YNHH has an amazing NICU with amazing nurses. Shout out to them. And it is complicated, I think, for a lot of the reasons you explained. I'm in a mom's group with someone who did not know that they were pregnant until 20 weeks into their pregnancy. And I will also say, like, if it's not something, even when we hear about much earlier cutoffs, so like 6 weeks or 8 weeks, for a lot of people, if you're not like tracking your ovulation, which basically tells you that you need to have sex on a Tuesday night at like 8 p.m. to get pregnant, if you're not doing that and not maybe paying attention to your body, it's really easy to miss.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I think that's true. And I'm also wondering, what the legal landscape in Connecticut looks like right now. Understanding that things are sort of scarily shifting and changing around us. And shout out to William Tong, who I think as things come down, I think earlier this week I wrote an article in which I was like, wow, he's sued the Trump administration, I think 4 times.
I think that's where we're at. Yeah, that sounds right to me.
So I have no doubt that he will be here fighting on the right side of history. And we're in a moment where things are constantly changing. And I think about that all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think I'm, having done work in other states and all of that as well, I think we forget how we can be a safe place for the people that are here, but we also need to protect the people who are coming here for their needs. So I think that's one of the legal things that we're talking about as well. Again, there have been scary things, not as I know of in Connecticut yet, where like folks in New York, providers in New York are being subpoenaed for their medical records if they provided care to somebody who came from a state where abortion is either illegal or heavily restricted. So I think that's another thing, is like trying to make sure that we're protecting people who are coming here for their care. That's a big conversation, making sure that medical records are protected. And also, again, the more we need funding behind things, again, in many ways, because people as a state that has more access, right, more and more people are likely going to be coming here, and we're sort of seeing that for their care because we are a state that has access. Do we have the ability, do we have the funding and the money and the space to be able to make sure these people who need to come here are getting what they need as well? So, in a lot of ways, we need the government to put the money where the mouth is and give our clinics, give our local organizations and people who are doing this work grants and funding to make sure that we're able to provide, for the folks who need to come here because they can't access it where they're coming from. So those are a couple of the legal landscape things that we're looking at specifically. And again, we're thinking long term. Like, we want to talk about, the gestation limit and those things. We want to talk about how to just make this something that is just possible for people. And again, another thing that's really important to me is we also want to talk about any kind of healthcare and having that be protected. Gender affirming care is reproductive health care and vice versa as well. That should also be a piece of this conversation too. So I think it's making sure that, no matter what kind of healthcare, Husky for immigrants, making sure that undocumented folks have access to insurance and healthcare the same way everyone else does, right? It is all interconnected. And we need our government and the folks in leadership to not be picking and choosing. This is not the conversation we want to be having. This is all together.
I just want to remind people, if they're just joining us here or if they've been with us for this conversation, I'm Lucy Gellman. This is Arts Respond on WNHHLP 103.5 FM New Haven. My guest today is Cadence Pentheny. They are a board member. Words are hard sometimes. A board member and secretary with the Connecticut Reach Fund, Connecticut's first abortion fund. And the Reach Fund right now is in the midst of their Fund-a-Thon, which we will talk about a little more in just a second, I promise, because that is the reason why we're here. But Cadence, I also wanted to ask you, I think it was 2 weeks ago, although everything is moving in a way that my brain has just turned to mush. That a huge decision came down from the federal government about Title X funding and the way that it would affect sort of institutions dedicated to comprehensive family planning, preventative healthcare services, and we're also talking about in this way Planned Parenthood of Southern New England and Planned Parenthoods across the country. Gander Newsroom, which is a nonprofit newsroom in Michigan, did great and devastating reporting earlier this week about the closure of several Planned Parenthood offices across the state, and that's what we're going to see across the country and what we're already seeing. And so I'm wondering what the conversation is within the Reach Fund, knowing that you're volunteer-based, knowing that your capabilities are finite, and that this is a need that we probably anticipate will grow in the next years, really in the next weeks and months.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So it kind of is directly tied to our funding model at Reach. So again, being a small, all volunteer run fund. So a lot of abortion funds that have been around longer and who might have paid staff and things like that do a hotline model, right? In which just a person can call a hotline and speak to a person and talk about, where they want to get their appointment and just all of these things. Because we are small and all volunteer run, we do not have a hotline model. So the way that our funding system works is we have agreements with all of the clinics in Connecticut that provide abortions. So that's all of the Planned Parenthoods, as well as Hartford GYN, which is the only independent clinic in Connecticut. So we partner directly with clinics. And which also make things safer for patients. So we don't collect any patient information at all, which makes things safer for us and for them. So essentially a patient just needs to make their appointment at a clinic and then tell the clinic that they need financial support, and then the clinic applies whatever amount of the block grant they deem necessary that we give them each month to that patient's funding. So we are directly tied with clinics, right? So I think they're going to need to shift around their funding, right, to make up for the fact that they are now losing this federal funding. So as they're trying to shift around and make sure that they're able to fund the other kinds of healthcare that they provide, because they all provide so many different kinds of healthcare to communities, not just abortion care, which is, again, just something you see people think about all the time. They provide everything from like primary care to just everything, right? So we're going to need more money because they're going to probably need to start applying their funding that they might have been able to, apply to abortion care to other things. So we as Reach are just thinking about the ways that we need to come in to support them to provide, the piece of the puzzle that is our focus and finding funding for abortion care.
So that's such a natural segue into the fact that we are in this period that started last month and goes through the end of May. I was like, what month are we in?
I know.
May 31st, to raise funds for the REACH Fund, and also the NNAF, which is the National Network of Abortion Funds, which it has been through its own leadership transitions. Recently is working toward a $2.5 million goal, and has pledged to match contributions up to 50K at different abortion funds. So I'm wondering if you can talk about what the Fund-a-Thon is, why it's important, and we'll circle back to this question also, like how it can be joyful. I think sometimes in the discussion, especially right now about abortion, it can feel extremely heavy,
Yeah.
and sort of woven with trauma. And for some people, that is their experience. And I want to name and recognize that. But for some people, it's also an extremely liberating choice that they're able to make.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Fund-a-Thon is a annual event put on or sponsored really by the National Network of Abortion Funds. So as it sounds from the name, the National Network is the overreaching organization that I would say the majority of abortion funds in the country are a part of. So the REACH Fund is a member of the National Network of Abortion Funds. So essentially, as you said, the National Network matches every dollar that local and state abortion funds raise who are members of the National Network up to $50,000. So that's an incredible chunk of money that really, again, is something that helps make us sustainable, right?
Yeah.
Being able to have that access. And we want Fund-a-Thon to be fun, as you were saying. We have done so many, several great little events so far throughout the Fund-a-Thon season. We did a great book event up in the Hartford area with an author who is the founder of We Testify, which is a great abortion organization where folks share their abortion stories. We did a fun event last week in Norwalk, where I am, called Basketball. They played the women's basketball games, and we did a raffle, and all of those kinds of things, right? So we try to do a lot of little events. We have lots of folks, both volunteers and board members, who have created their own pages through our Fund-a-Thon. We have someone who's doing baked goods and selling their baked goods to raise funds. Like we have people who've gotten, very, very creative to do just fun things for us. We've had local tattoo artists donate, flash pages of tattoos and donate a portion to us. So like people get really creative with their fundraising and make it joyful. And, we have fun. We do stickers and things like that when we do resource tables. There's been several times where I've been at a resource table, a little kid will come up because it's stickers and they look fun. But our stickers say abortion on them. And oftentimes it's a sweet parent who'll be like, yes, you can have the sticker, but maybe we can't put it on your backpack for school, right? Just so we don't cause any issues at school for you, right? But just people, again, and then we have had people say, oh, well, you shouldn't be at family events. No, families care about abortion, right? Families, understand that it's important. People with little kids understand that it's important, right? Often more so than other people, right? For people to have access. So we want to get together. And again, that's one of the ways that I think we see how the work matters is when we get together and be in community and do fun things like, get together. I love going to Pride events in June and having tables there and seeing, all of the ways people are excited and want to engage with us. So I think being in community, having these events, giving whatever it is that we can give, right? We have incredible like artists who work with us and design like zines and stickers and, our end of year thank you cards. And just there's so many ways to give. Like, yes, the money is important, but we have people who get incredibly creative to support and work with us. And I think that's the joy. And it's joyful to get things for other people and to make sure that other people have access. It's one of my favorite things. It feels like the most tangible form of support that I give on a daily basis.
I'm also wondering, you mentioned Renee Bracey Sherman, who
Yes.
is the author of Liberating Abortion
Mhm.
and the director and founder of We Testify, which does amazing work around storytelling. And
Yeah.
we know this is like backed up by data. I mean, I love storytelling anyway, so even if it wasn't, whatever. But it's backed up by data that when people speak about their own lived experiences, it has the power to shift the way folks may feel, especially if someone, maybe feels a certain way about abortion, about reproductive justice, perhaps because of the home they were raised in or their own faith beliefs. They may meet someone who says, "Let me tell you how an abortion saved my life." Um, and that may or may not change how they feel. And so I'm curious, what are some of the intimate or candid conversations that you've had with folks? Because I know that even when I've been wearing, I have the shirt from a couple years ago that's the NNAFs, like everybody loves somebody who has an
Mhm.
abortion, which is true. I mean, like in my own experience, that is just a fact,
Yeah.
statistically speaking. Um, but people have come up to me and some have said, "Oh, I really like that." And some have said, "I feel a certain way and let me tell you
Yeah.
why." And so I'm wondering, for you, if you talk about your work with the Reach Fund, are there candid conversations that you've had with people around this work and why it's so important to have the right to safe, affordable, and accessible abortion care?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and again, as I said, we were speaking earlier, it's interesting how people react specifically to the word abortion, or just the concept of abortion, even if they believe themselves to be supporters of reproductive choice and access and equity, right? Sometimes the word abortion, and honestly, it's not their fault a lot of the time, just that language and the thought of like what it is. Everyone has seen some awful either maybe in high school they did, right? Like of the education, like some awful picture. Often, again, the pictures that people use to scare people are often miscarriages. Also, it's not actually abortion that someone's using a picture of. Often, if they're trying to scare you, it's often like a miscarriage or something else has happened for that fetus to no longer be in a person's body. So even just the representation and the imagery and just all of those things are can be triggering for people in so many different kinds of ways. And it's just another thing that we've like deeply stigmatized in our culture, again, even for people who feel that they think other people should have access and choice, right? So we definitely hear it a lot. We hear people's all sorts of different kinds of reactions. But then, as you said, from you just wearing the shirt, we also see people coming up to us and just being really, really grateful. And sometimes it's people you wouldn't expect, like older men, again, families with little kids, right? Again, that doesn't surprise us, but it like surprises some people that like families with little kids or just kids in general will come up to us when we're at an event and be excited that we're there and share their story. A small handful of times, most of the time we have no idea, which is another piece of it because we shouldn't. It's up to a person, but a handful of times we've had somebody reach out and say like, your funding helped me get my abortion, right? And that's really, really, really special. We don't do it for that recognition, but it's special when we know as well. Again, tangible resources. We have as a reproductive health supported agency, we get free Plan B through Plan B, the company, and people get real excited. Boyfriends will take it home. They're like, "Oh my gosh, my girlfriend really happy to have this." We give free Plan B out at events and things like that as well. So, when you get the tough crowd and you get the people sometimes unexpected who are like really excited that we're there in spaces as well. So it's a whole range of things.
And do you also find, because I know that you are in this education work outside of your role at the
Yeah.
Reach Fund as well, do you also find that part of it is just talking about reproductive education? Like, we live in a country where I have multiple degrees, and I didn't know that long-acting reversible contraception, i.e., an IUD, was an option until I was like 22 years old, which was probably a decade into menstruating. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think a lot of people have that experience. And so when we talk about things like Plan B, is it also just the education piece and talking to people about not just the freedom to access abortion care if you need it, but also like how to not get pregnant? Because I really wish we were not here,
Mm-hmm.
but I often talk to people who just like don't know how to access birth control.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it happens. It's that piece of the puzzle of this of all of the things, right? So yeah, we almost always give out Plan B at events. We give out condoms. We are putting together. We have volunteers. So if something interests anybody, definitely reach out to us. Putting together like reproductive care kits that we are planning to mostly give out at the Pride events we're going to this summer that include things like a pregnancy test and a condom and Plan B and like fun little stickers and zines and things like that. So we're planning to give that out at a lot of the events that we're going to over Pride and over the summer as a whole. And again, just fun little stickers and things like that. The Pride events are funny because often you get two women come up who are in a relationship with each other and like, well, we don't need this based on our relationship, but I know a friend who does, or this would, be important, for us to just have around in case, somebody needs it as well. So, yeah, we again, and people also will have no idea what an abortion is and will ask us questions about that. There's a great book that's actually aimed at kids called What is an Abortion Anyway? It's available,
Yes, Charlie means, yes.
yeah, yeah. It's available, I believe, in Spanish. Can't remember if it's another language as well, but I know it's available in Spanish. That's great. We often have copies of those out at tables because, again, people don't think abortion is something that you can talk about with kids, right? But again, families and people with kids are often the people who are needing abortions. So it's just an overall conversation, and the more we start talking about it, the easier, again, it's going to be for people, even the people who have complicated feelings about their abortion, which is something that is so deeply allowed. Something I think about a lot is when we feel so put upon to fight for something that we need. In a way, it stops us from being able to talk about having complicated feelings about things. Right. So that's something I think about a lot, especially, my full-time work is focused in LGBTQ education. And I just think when we're constantly having to fight for our access and our rights and our choice, right, it removes the ability to have nuanced conversations and feelings about things in so many different ways because there are people who are just waiting to twist what we're saying. So I think that's such an important conversation to have.
Yeah, I think all of that is true. And I know recently Jessica Valenti just did this
Mhm.
great video. I think it was earlier this week. So for folks who don't know, she does a great publication called Abortion Every Day and has been following a lot of the admittedly very scary legislative stuff that is happening around this country. But she did a video where she spoke about her own relationship with abortion, including an abortion that she had after already becoming a mother, because during her first pregnancy, she had preeclampsia, followed by something called HELP syndrome, and very nearly died. So she very nearly died, and her now teenage daughter, who she was carrying, also very nearly died. And when she became pregnant again, she did not want to leave her daughter.
Yep.
Which is, I mean, I was watching this while I was breastfeeding.
Oh God.
I doom scroll while I breastfeed. Terrible habit, really bad habit. And like just totally weeping.
Yeah.
But I think you're so right, Cadence, when you say that people do have complicated, and she talked about both knowing that this for herself and her family was the right decision and feeling grief and allowing herself to like mourn that loss of what would have been a second child and how she loves being a mother and it's very central to her identity. And I think that's true for a lot of birthing people.
Yeah.
And as you so eloquently said earlier, it's also no one's business, right? Like some people are gonna decide that they don't want to be pregnant, go and get an abortion, and then eat a burrito and move on with their day, and that's okay too.
Yeah.
So I do want to ask two final questions. The first is just, if folks are listening to this and they say, I want to get involved, I want to donate, I want to go to Reach Fund events, I want to buy some cool merch. Y'all have really good swag, by the way. It's just, there's a shirt with a duck that says abortion bans are foul.
Yeah.
It's a shirt. How can they do that? How can they get involved?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are on social media. We're on Reach Fund, at Reach Fund CT on everything as well. We post all the time on social media about events and things that are coming up, about ways you can get involved. Also, definitely check out our website, reachfundct.org. If you're interested in volunteering, we have a volunteer form up there. And again, that looks like things like, again, donating your time or your money or hosting a reproductive health kit, like I said, we're giving away at Pride, or again, people have wanted to like put on like fundraising dinners for us just at their home, things like that. There's so many different ways, to get involved and offer your resources and support. And just a plug, one thing that we see happen a lot, especially as a fund, right, is we get what we call rage donations, right? So something big will happen, right, in the news about abortion access and rights, and we get a bunch of, maybe sometimes a bunch of donations, or maybe a couple big donations. That's wonderful. That's great. But it's also not as sustainable for us as just giving a little bit every month. So we are super encouraging, and we love the raise donations. We love them. But in terms of being able to plan and be sustainable and make sure that we're here for the long term, becoming a monthly donor, being a member of what we call our patron pack. We use the husky as our mascot, just because Connecticut. And sometimes people give as small as $1 a month, but guess what? That is $1 a month that we can count on, and it matters. Again, I can tell you, as a small, all volunteer run organization, I see the back end, I see the budget, and I see how even that $1 to $2 a month makes a difference. So we are super, super encouraging of people who want to join our monthly donor squad, again, at any amount. It all really, really, really matters. And it helps us be able to plan for the future and be here for as long as people need us. Again, of course, the goal is that we get free healthcare eventually in our lifetimes, right? But we are here until that happens, and we want to make sure that that's the case.
I would love to see that. And yeah, I just want to echo that the website is extremely easy to get to, reachfundct.org. Boom, boom, boom. So before you leave, I always ask folks, what do you do to take care of yourself? I was asking this question before Trump 2.0, by the way. But I think sometimes it's really easy to get caught in like an existential doom spiral.
Yeah.
And that can be pretty paralyzing for people. So how do you also make sure that as you're taking care of others, as you're thinking about the health and well-being of others, you're also safeguarding your own heart?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I appreciate my work with Reach in that, as I was actually just thinking about this, I was just creating my own little fundraising page for Fund-a-Thon, and just how Reach it feels tangible to me, and I think that is really helpful. Again, I do LGBTQ plus community education work, full time. That's my full time role, and when you educate people, especially about a topic like gender and sexuality, they're often very quiet. You aren't sure what they're thinking about. You're not sure what's sticking with people. I often don't hear from people. I'm just seeing them one time for a training or a program that I'm leading, right? I don't often know. It feels very abstract, right? So I think doing things that are tangible, again, we don't often know who the patients are. Really, the patients that we know a little bit more about are the folks that we do our solidarity funding for, right? So folks who are from other states, coming to other states for abortion. So we're in like a clinic loop for that. And that's where we might know that someone's a teenager or someone is unhoused or someone is coming from another country for their abortion. It means something to get an email from that clinic and they say, based on the help that we were able to chip in, that person was fully funded, so that things are fully tangible that way. We laugh, we have a good time at Reach. I think we're all very much people with each other. I'm also, again, grateful that the LGBTQ organization I work at full time, we are very much people with each other. We share silly, goofy memes. If folks are into reproductive health and justice memes, repro memes on Instagram is a great one to follow. We gotta laugh, we gotta make jokes. I'm waiting for this warmer weather for my little mental health walks and things like that. I think we need the sunshine, we need the people, we need stuff like that as well. And I'm just want to engage with my community, and that's what's keeping me afloat right now.
Cadence Pimpany, I want to thank you so much for coming on Arts Respond. I know it's also like Friday when people are trying to tie things up for the week, although often in the arts and nonprofit, I also work for a nonprofit, so like weekends don't really exist,
No.
but they're a nice idea
Yes.
in theory.
And being a parent, I'm sure, is another piece of it. Yeah.
Yeah, but also like this whole time I've been so moved by the fact that you said, some of the folks who come up to you most readily are parents.
Yeah.
And to me, that makes so much sense because I entered into parenthood like very willingly. It was something that I wanted. This was a very planned pregnancy. And also having been through it, I can't imagine not wanting to be pregnant
And having to.
and having to be forced to give birth.
Yeah.
And also like raising a child is hard. It's hard all the time and it's expensive.
Yes.
I wish it were not. I wish we lived in Denmark.
Yeah.
We don't. And so yeah, so this whole time, I mean, I'm gonna get like choked up. Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about my son and the fact that I hope that when he is old enough to understand what an abortion fund is and give to an abortion fund, like maybe we will be in some universe where the need is no longer as great because healthcare is in a different and much better place.
Yeah.
But I just want to thank you so much for coming on the show. Y'all, if you are out there and you are listening to this and you have the resources and you are able to give, please consider giving to the Reach Fund before May 30. I mean, really anytime, but especially before May 31st so they can get that cute matchy-matchy donation from the National Network of Abortion Funds. Cadence, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. And I was going to say enjoy the sun, but it's not sunny.
We'll get there.
We'll get there. We'll get there. Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Thank you.